In the quaint English town of Ashford Green, nestled between rolling hills and winding cobblestone streets, lived a young woman named Emily Parker. At 16, Emily's life was far from ordinary, caught in the tangled web of family secrets, shifting loyalties, and the quiet, painful unraveling of what was supposed to be her sanctuary. Emily had always been her father's favorite. From the tender age when her parents' marriage crumbled like old plaster off a Victorian wall, her father, David Parker, insisted she live with him rather than stay in the family home with her mother, Grace, and her new husband, a man Emily barely tolerated. David feared for her safety, worried her stepfather might not treat her kindly. And truth be told, Emily felt the cold shadow of that man's disapproval every time she crossed the threshold of her mother's house. The lack of her own space, the cramped apartment with no room to breathe, no sanctuary of her own, it was stifling. In David's spacious Victorian manor, with its high ceilings and bay windows overlooking the village green, Emily at least had a room all to herself, a place where she could close the door and for a moment, forget the pressures pressing in from all sides. Her mother, Grace, was a strict woman, wrapped in a mantle of righteousness that often felt suffocating. She controlled Emily's clothing choices with an iron grip, forbidding makeup and monitoring every move as if she suspected Emily would run off to join a traveling circus or worse, a boy band. Grace's watchful eyes made Emily feel like a prisoner, even when she was supposed to be home. It was no surprise that Emily longed to return to her father's house, where, despite the complicated family dynamics, she felt a semblance of freedom. David's new wife, Helen, was a quiet, resigned woman. She had long struggled with infertility, a wound that had driven a wedge between her and David. Their marriage was more of a truce than a romance, with Helen trying her best not to add to Emily's burdens. She was gentle, almost fragile, and though Emily barely knew how to feel about her stepmother, she appreciated the absence of cruelty, a stark contrast to the coldness she sometimes faced elsewhere. When Emily turned 16, tragedy struck. Helen's condition worsened, and she passed away after a brief illness. The loss hit David hard, leaving him a broken man who poured his affection and attention into Emily like a dam bursting its banks. Suddenly, the man who had been a distant figure in her life became her entire world. He spoiled her with gifts, took her out to the best restaurants in Ashford Green, and lavished time and attention upon her as if trying to fill a void that could never be healed. But there was a shadow behind David's generosity, a silent tension that Emily couldn't quite place. When he spoke of her growing up, of her turning 18 or 20, and even suggested she might want to marry someday, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. His questions were awkward, his explanations clumsy, veiling something deeper and more disturbing beneath his concern. One evening, as the amber glow of the fireplace flickered against the walls of the study, David tried to broach the subject of adult matters. He spoke hesitantly about things Emily didn't understand, the internet, certain films, cultural norms, and what he called education. Emily, confused and wary, sensed something was wrong. The way he looked at her, the tone of his voice, it wasn't the protective love she had known. It was something else, something that made her skin crawl. "I don't want to get married right now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I don't want to move back with Mum, not even if her new husband is better than I remember." David's face hardened for a moment, then softened again. "I just want what's best for you," he said. "You're all I have left." Emily nodded, but inside a knot of fear tightened. She didn't know how to navigate the strange new world her father was trying to drag her into, one filled with secrets, blurred boundaries, and unspoken dangers. At night, she locked her bedroom door, trembling, unsure of whom to trust. The man who had once been her protector now seemed like a stranger, and the house that once felt like a refuge had become a cage. As Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the shadows danced and whispered of things yet to come, of choices she would have to make, and a darkness lurking just beyond the flickering lamplight, and somewhere, deep in the silence, a mystery waited to unravel, threatening to change everything Emily thought she knew about love, family, and herself. The following weeks in Ashford Green were painted with a peculiar mixture of unease and fragile normalcy. Emily tried to cling to the routines that once brought her comfort, the quiet morning walks through the dew-kissed village gardens, the accidental clatter of teacups in the kitchen, the soft hum of the radio playing her favorite songs as she got ready for the day. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. One she could neither predict nor control. David's attentions, once a balm to her wounded heart, began to feel suffocating. He was always there, hovering, watching, his eyes lingering a moment too long on the curve of her neck or the soft sweep of her hair. Emily found herself adjusting the hem of her skirt more frequently, tugging at the edges of her blouse as if to shield herself from the invisible gaze. She'd started wearing the long flowing dresses she once adored, the ones that swayed with every step and whispered secrets to the breeze, hoping the fabric might serve as a barrier, a silent plea for distance. On one particular afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of rose and lavender, Emily was preparing for a small gathering at the manor. A few close friends from school invited over for tea and laughter. She chose a delicate, pale blue dress, the fabric soft and light against her skin, cinched modestly at the waist with a thin velvet ribbon. Her feet slipped into a pair of cream-colored ballet flats, the kind that made her feel both graceful and grounded. Around her neck, a simple silver locket gleamed softly, a gift from her late mother that she wore like a talisman as guests arrived. Laughter bubbling, the clink of china, the rustle of conversations. David maintained his usual charm, playing the perfect host. But Emily caught glimpses of something in his gaze, a flicker of something darker beneath the polished veneer. She tried to dismiss it as paranoia, a trick of her imagination fueled by late-night fears and half-remembered warnings from her mother. Midway through the afternoon, as the group moved from the sunlit conservatory into the shadowed drawing room, David pulled Emily aside. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "Emily, darling, come with me for a moment. There's something I want to show you." Curiosity battled with caution as she followed him down the dim corridor, the walls lined with faded portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to judge the present. They stopped before a heavy wooden door, its brass handle cool beneath her fingers. David hesitated, then opened it to reveal a small room, its walls lined with shelves crammed full of DVDs and books. But this collection was unlike any Emily had seen before. Titles whispered of worlds she wasn't sure she wanted to enter, films with suggestive covers, books with provocative titles, materials that danced along the edges of propriety. "I thought it might be time," David said awkwardly, "to introduce you to adult things. It's important you understand the world the way people really are. Not just the stories on the telly, but the ones behind closed doors." Emily swallowed, a dry lump forming in her throat. "I don't think I'm ready," she whispered. David's expression softened into something almost tender. "You don't have to be. But I'll be here to guide you. Always." The weight of his words pressed down on her, making her stomach twist. She wanted to trust him, to believe in the father who had once been her protector. But the man standing before her now was someone she barely recognized. Later that night, Emily lay in bed, the locket warm against her chest, her mind racing with questions she dared not voice aloud. The house was silent save for the ticking of an old grandfather clock, each tick a reminder of time slipping away, of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Was her father's love genuine, or was it something else? A dangerous obsession disguised as care? And if she stayed, would she lose herself in the shadows of his world? As the moonlight spilled through her curtains, casting silver patterns on the floor, Emily made a silent vow. She would find the truth no matter the cost. But in the depths of the manor, unseen and unheard, a shadow stirred. A whisper of a past long buried. A secret that threatened to shatter everything Emily held dear. And with that, the night closed in heavy with promise and peril. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope stretched precariously above a dark abyss. Emily's world, once filled with the innocent rhythms of youth, now pulsed with an undercurrent of tension she couldn't shake. She found herself retreating into the sanctuary of the manor's sprawling library, a room lined with towering shelves of leather-bound tomes, and the faint scent of aged parchment. Here she could lose herself in stories of far-off lands and daring adventures, temporarily escaping the complicated maze of her own life. On this particular afternoon, Emily had wrapped herself in a soft cashmere cardigan, its pale cream color complementing the gentle flush of her cheeks. Her skirt, a playful swirl of navy and white, brushed just above her knees as she perched on the edge of a plush armchair. Her chestnut hair was loosely tied back with a silk ribbon, a few rebellious strands framing her face, lending her a wistful, almost ethereal quality. A slender silver bracelet, engraved with delicate ivy leaves, encircled her wrist, a subtle nod to the strength she was trying to summon within herself as she delved into a novel about a daring young woman who defied societal expectations. The sharp chime of the manor's antique grandfather clock pulled her back to reality. The sound echoed through the high-ceilinged room, a reminder that the sanctuary she sought was fragile and temporary. Footsteps approached, steady and deliberate. David entered the library, his tailored navy blazer slightly rumpled, as if he'd been pacing. His face bore the weariness of a man wrestling with demons both internal and external. But beneath the fatigue, there was an intensity in his piercing blue eyes that unsettled Emily. "I thought you might be here," he said, his voice low but firm. "We need to talk." Emily closed her book, the weight of inevitability settling over her. "About what?" she asked cautiously, trying to keep her tone neutral. David hesitated, then sighed. "About us. About everything. I know things have been difficult, confusing, but I want to be honest with you. You're not just my daughter anymore. Not in the way you think." Emily's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "What do you mean?" she whispered. He stepped closer, the room suddenly feeling smaller, the walls closing in. "I'm talking about the truth behind the family, the choices I've made, the things I've tried to protect you from. There are parts of our story you don't know yet. Secrets that, if left buried, could destroy us both." Emily's breath hitched. The air between them crackled with tension. "Secrets?" she echoed. David nodded slowly. "Yes, and I need you to understand them, to see the world as it really is. Not the fairy tale we pretend to live in." She swallowed hard, the mixture of fear and curiosity knotting in her stomach. "But why now? Why tell me this?" "Because you're growing up. Because soon you'll have to make choices. Choices that could change your life forever. I want you prepared, not naive." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "I don't know if I'm ready for any of this." David's expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his usual stoicism. "None of us ever are. But sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need the most." There was a long pause, the silence thick with unspoken words. Then, with a sudden change of subject, David offered a faint, almost awkward smile. "By the way, I arranged for you to meet someone. A friend of mine. Someone who might be good for you. Not that you're in a rush to get married, of course." Emily raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. "Are you trying to set me up, Dad?" He chuckled, the sound surprisingly light. "Maybe. Just don't tell your mother." She laughed softly, the moment of levity a brief reprieve from the storm. But as David left the room, Emily's mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was this mysterious friend? What secrets was her father hiding? And most importantly, how much longer could she pretend that everything was normal? That night, as she lay beneath the soft covers of her bed, the silver locket resting against her heart, Emily stared into the darkness and wondered if the truth would set her free, or bind her forever. Outside, the wind whispered through the ancient oaks surrounding the manor, carrying with it a promise. The past was not done with them yet. The following morning dawned over Ashford Green with a soft mist curling through the narrow streets, blurring the edges of the quaint cottages and flowering hedgerows. Emily woke to the gentle tapping of rain against her window pane, the rhythmic patter a soothing counterpoint to the storm swirling in her mind. She dressed with care. A pale lavender blouse, its delicate lace collar resting just so against her collarbone, paired with a high-waisted skirt that swished softly as she moved. Her feet slipped into polished black Mary Jane shoes, their glossy finish catching the morning light. Around her neck the silver locket shimmered faintly, an anchor amid the uncertainty. Tea breakfast. The manor's grand dining room was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed tea and warm scones. David sat at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence softened by the early hour. He glanced up as Emily entered, offering a brief nod that barely masked the tension simmering beneath. "Your friend will be here this afternoon," he mentioned casually, stirring his tea. "I thought it might be good for you to have some company." Emily forced a smile, the idea of meeting a stranger conjuring a blend of apprehension and curiosity. "I appreciate it," she replied, keeping her voice steady. The hours crawled by, each tick of the clock amplifying her nervous anticipation. She found herself wandering the sunlit corridors of the manor, fingers trailing along the polished banister, eyes darting to the heavy oak door that concealed David's secrets. The rain had ceased, leaving the gardens glistening with droplets, the scent of wet earth mingling with blooming roses. When the doorbell finally rang, Emily's heart leapt into her throat. She smoothed her blouse, adjusted the ribbon in her hair, and took a deep breath before descending the grand staircase. At the door stood a man, tall with a lean build and an easy confidence that seemed both reassuring and unfamiliar. His sandy hair was tousled just so, and his green eyes sparkled with a mischievous light. He wore a tailored tweed jacket over a crisp white shirt, the ensemble both classic and effortlessly stylish. "Emily, I presume?" he said with a warm smile, extending a hand. She hesitated, then shook it, feeling a jolt of electricity at the contact. "Yes, that's me. I'm Tom Whitaker," he introduced himself. "A friend of your father's. I've heard a lot about you." Emily's cheeks flushed slightly. "All good things, I hope." Tom laughed softly. "Of course. Your father speaks very highly of you." They moved into the drawing room, where the afternoon sun filtered through stained glass, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the Persian rug. As they settled into plush armchairs, Tom's easy charm began to unravel the tight knot of tension Emily had been carrying. They talked about everything and nothing, the latest books they'd read, the quirks of village life, the oddities of Ashford Green's annual fete. Tom's laughter was infectious, and for a moment, Emily forgot the weight of her father's gaze, the secrets lurking in the shadows. Yet, beneath Tom's genial exterior, Emily sensed a quiet intelligence, a depth that promised more than casual conversation. When he reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, the gesture was gentle, respectful, an unspoken promise of kindness in a world that had often felt cold. As twilight deepened, and the first stars winked into existence, the manor's atmosphere shifted. David appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I see you've met Tom," he said, voice low. Emily nodded, a flicker of defiance sparking in her eyes. "Yes. He's nice." David's gaze lingered a moment longer before he turned away, leaving the room heavy with unspoken thoughts. Later that night, Emily stood by her bedroom window, the cool glass pressing against her palm. The village lay quiet beneath the moon's silver glow, but her mind was anything but still. What did her father truly want? Why had he brought Tom into her life? And most unsettling of all, what secrets was he still hiding behind those weathered walls? As the locket's cool weight pressed against her heart, Emily felt the first stirrings of resolve. She would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. Because in Ashford Green, appearances were deceiving, and the past had a way of clawing back when least expected. And somewhere, beyond the veil of night, a shadow watched and waited, patient, relentless, and hungry for the secrets Emily was only beginning to unveil. The days that followed seemed to fold into one another like the pages of a well-worn book, each moment familiar yet tinged with an undercurrent of unease. Emily found herself caught between the world she knew and the one her father was slowly revealing, a labyrinth of whispered warnings and half-truths that left her both curious and wary. One breezy afternoon, the manor's grand drawing room was bathed in golden light filtering through heavy velvet curtains. Emily sat near the window, the soft fabric of her emerald green dress pooling around her knees. The dress hugged her figure just enough to hint at the graceful lines beneath, the delicate lace trim at the cuffs lending a touch of vintage charm. Her chestnut hair cascaded over one shoulder in loose waves, a single pearl earring catching the light as she tilted her head in thought. Tom Whitaker was there too, seated across from her in a high-backed leather chair, his expression thoughtful as he watched her. Today, his usual tweed jacket was replaced by a simple navy sweater, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, a glimpse of the man behind the polished exterior. They had been talking for hours, wandering through topics both light and profound. Tom had a way of listening that made Emily feel seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if he understood the silent battles she fought, the fears she kept locked behind her poised smile. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open and David entered, his face drawn and serious. The warmth in the room shifted, replaced by a chill that seemed to seep into the very air. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "There's something you need to know, something I should have told you long ago." Emily felt her pulse quicken. She glanced at Tom, whose gaze was steady, supportive. David continued, "Our family has a history, a past tangled in things that aren't easy to explain. But it's important you understand, especially now that you're older. There are dangers out there. Things I've tried to shield you from." Emily's breath caught. "What kind of dangers?" He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out an old, folded letter yellowed with age. "This belonged to your great-grandfather. It speaks of debts and alliances, things that could affect you, even today. She took the letter gingerly, unfolding it to reveal cryptic handwriting and a wax seal bearing an unfamiliar crest. The words hinted at promises made in shadows, deals forged in desperation, and a legacy that was both a blessing and a curse. Tom leaned forward, his voice low. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It reaches out, demanding attention. Emily's fingers trembled as she read the letter again, the weight of her family's secrets pressing down on her like a storm cloud. For the first time, the pieces of her fractured world began to align, revealing a tapestry both beautiful and terrifying. That night, as she lay in her bed, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the room, Emily felt the walls of the manor closing in. The locket around her neck felt heavier, a reminder that the life she thought she knew was only the surface, and somewhere beyond the garden gate, hidden in the shadows, eyes watched with a hunger that promised the next chapter would bring revelations and dangers she was only beginning to comprehend.